Okay, let's look at this case together. And so, looking at the smile, we can see there's a bit of a maxillary cant with the dentition, also the soft tissue smile. We also have an anterior open bite and some associated TMD and also some breakdown of the posterior teeth, which oftentimes we'll see with that open bite. You can see the midlines on the lower midlines off to the left. We have a little bit of asymmetry in the arch forms. You can see the arch form of the canine here kind of jutting out there at that right canine. And so, looking at our plan, this was our initial plan. So you can see here we started out with a quick three, basically get the teeth moving here. You can see the mobility there, just a little bit of facial crown tip there. Then we started to move the teeth. Now our initial plan went all the way up until aligner 14, upper and lower. Okay, so this was our setup or our plan. You can see we went from here to here. We had added some posterior turbos to help with the closure of the anterior open bite. You can see the amount of IPR, a little bit of a class 3 tendency. Patient declined anything more aggressive for correcting that, and so we went ahead and used some IPR there. And we're doing our best to shift this upper midline to the patient's left a little bit, along with moving the lower midline to the patient's right. So we're doing what we can to kind of get these more aligned if possible. So this was our initial setup. Now what you don't see in here is the bite shift. And so you can see here it just looks like a lot of excess overjet, and that's because in this software the bite shift isn't going to happen until the very end. But rest assured, when we did this, you could see the bite shift, and this would shift down into a class 1. Okay, so that was the first set of aligners that the patient wore. Now, when the patient came in at that point, we did a chairside refinement. So you can see here what we were working on. The anterior teeth still needed to shift over more. So aligners 14 through 17 on the top. This is the first chairside refinement that we did. So patient continued to wear the aligners. You could see we needed a little bit more mesial lingual on that upper left too as well. So we pushed that in and we continued to shift everything over. We actually, it looks like, created almost a little bit of space there with this first chairside refinement here. And on the lower, you can see we went from 14 to 16. So same kind of thing. We started shifting that over. At the same time, we needed some facial crown tip on the 4 there. So you can see that moved facially, and everything else is kind of shifting. We're shifting the arch form, moving that to the patient's right, left on the screen. And so the patient wore those aligners. Now, when the patient came back at that point, you can see that we still weren't quite ready to be done. And obviously, we're not going to be done yet. We're still early in treatment. So now we did our next chairside refinement. You can see we're pushing even further. We needed a little bit more space. What that's telling me is that that canine was still having a hard time with that mesial lingual movement and shifting over to the side. So you can see here we have some mesial facial on the upper left canine, some distal lingual on the upper right canine, and we're continuing to shift that midline over and over as this arch form is continuing to attempt to correct. On the bottom here, you can see from 16 to 19, we're doing a similar thing here. All right, we're trying to get that lower midline shifted over to the side. And this is where we saw the patient today, and I went ahead and updated some photos to make it more clear like where we are. So now if you look at this setup, so this is where the setup was. Let's see if it's, yeah, it's gonna make me move both of them. So either way, it's pretty close. So this setup is where the patient was today when they came into my office. Okay, so you can see here, it looks like there's too much excess overjet here. You can see that the midlines, they look the opposite. They look like they are incorrect the opposite way. Okay, so these are what the aligners are programmed to do. You can see that that canine is too far down. One of these chairside refinements, you'll see that that anterior cant that we looked at initially, we wanted to do some work on that. So you can see those teeth coming down here as well in that first chairside refinement. So all of that's been baked into these designs up until this point, and this is what the design looks like. But when we look at what the patient's teeth look like today, again, this is where they started. All right, this is where the patient's teeth currently are. Okay, now you can see there has been some improvement with the maxillary cant. They still have some soft tissue differences in the way that they smile, but we have had some improvement bringing that upper right side down. But you'll also notice that there's still a little bit of two things. One, an interference here. We're hitting heavy on this cusp here on the upper right 6. And then also there's still an asymmetry in the overjet in the anterior, with the lower midline being off to the left and the upper midline being off to the right. So they're not coordinated. These arches are still not coordinated. And so the patient is still comfortably wearing the aligners, so we're going to continue to make movements, and that's what we'll talk about with today's chairside refinement. So when the patient came in, if you look back at these images, you can see we definitely need some lingual crown tip here. We need to intrude this 6 to get rid of that interference. And on the left side, although it doesn't show it well, it's a little tight at the 6s, and so we need to move these lower left 5, 6 in a little bit to help get the bite coordinated and get the best result possible. So here we go. This was the chairside refinement that we did today, and then I'll show you how we did that. We'll go ahead and delete it and we'll redo it. But you can see here, now we're working more on those posterior segments. All right, so we have some facial movement of that upper left side there. So you can see it's going to push that out, and we're at the same time we're doing some lingual crown tip to upright those roots and bringing that right side in a little bit. And at the same time, we move this turbo over to this cusp here, right where that interference is, to help eliminate that interference and help support those movements that are happening. All the while, we're still working on closing down the rest of this anterior open bite. You can see here that we're getting close to running out of overjet, so we may need some more IPR as we go forward. But we want to finish closing the open bite, and now we have more of like a lateral open bite there. And then get her finished up. So we're 10 months into treatment right now. Again, this is our, it looks like this is our second chairside. Let's see, we did one there, and this is our third chairside refinement. And so we'll look here, and you can see, and again, we're 10 months into treatment total right now. And we're going to work until we get all of our difficult movements done. And then after all the difficult movements are done, then we'll go ahead and debond the attachments and do post-debond settling aligners without the attachments on there. So let's look at how you would create this chairside refinement. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and we're going to go through. Let me get back to here. And let's see, we're going to go ahead and delete this keyframe here. And we're going to delete this keyframe here. And this is a duplicate plan, so I'm not worried about it. I'm not going to save this afterwards, but I just want to show you how that was created. So you'll go ahead and hit a plus sign there. And then on this left side, we want to move those facially, right? So you're going to go and just, once you hit that plus sign, it'll add a new keyframe. You can add that buckle if you want to do more on the premolars, for instance, than the molars. You can do that. And so you can see here, that's going to create that movement to bring that facially. And then on the opposite here, you're going to go ahead and move those lingually. Okay, so, and then also some lingual crown tip. So typically I'll start with the tipping movement, so we'll go ahead and torque those inward here and possibly move them a little bit lingual there. If anything, we may want to intrude to remove that interference a little bit there at the canine. And you can see we're closing down space there. The fact that we had to open up space there means that this wasn't tracking, so a lot of times I'll grab all those teeth and distalize them a little bit just to keep a little bit of extra arch length in that area. Okay, so as those teeth are moving, we don't start to bind in that area there. So you can see that's pretty much how you would do that top one. And on the bottom, we only did the lower left 5, 6, and so you'll go ahead again, add that keyframe, and you'll move those, detorque them, move them lingually, something like this. And you can go and you can look and say, okay, that's pretty close to where it was. You can see that move distal a little bit, so we'll move that back to the amount of the IPR that we had already done, 0.2 there. So you can see we're going to go ahead and move that in. Now, if you want to keep the patient on the same number of aligners, just from a scheduling standpoint, what you can do at this point, if we have 4 on the top, first thing you're going to want to decide is, do I need 4? If you need 4, great, then keep 4, and you can make the opposite side 4. So the way you'll do that is you'll hit that velocity button, hold the control button, and then go back to 19 here, and just crank this down to a much lower number. So if you did like 1.5, for instance, that's going to move that to 4 aligners there if you do want to keep them on the same number of aligners. So now those movements will just take a little bit longer, and they'll wear 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. We're going to ship these directly to the patient, so they'll have 2 weeks before they get them. So I'm going to see the patient back in about 8 to 9 weeks when they're on their last aligner, but not completely done with it. But you can see here again that the setup looks nothing like you would have probably imagined you would set it up initially. But when you go and look at the teeth and where that patient is, you can see that if anything, we actually need to make the setup look even worse to get her teeth where they need to be, because those overcorrections are necessary. So if you were to scan the patient for refinement right now, any of the force that this system is placing on those teeth is going to be lost essentially, right? And so all the force is going to start over at 0, and you're going to have to go basically back to where you were and recreate those forces that you already had in each of the setups before then. So by allowing the patient to continue to wear the aligners, you can simply continue to overcorrect anything that needs to be done. and have the appropriate forces, almost like, if you're coordinating an arch form and you grab an arch forming plier, you could skew the arch form facially here in the lower right 3 area and facially here in the lower left 3 area to help align your midlines and to help the buccal overjet even out on both sides. Again, those are the harder movements. Once the harder movements are done, again, take off all the attachments, scan the patient in CR, and remove the interferences that may be there in the bite to get to the post-debond settling aligners and get the occlusion settled down as good as possible. Let me know if you have any questions. I will try to get to them as quickly as I can. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week.